polarization. So the moment that you find yourself othering, the moment you find yourself getting into this real polarized thing, we actually become part of the problem. Just take a breath on that. We actually become part of the problem. It doesn't matter who's demonizing who. It doesn't matter who's trying to dominate over whom. It's the inability for us to perceive of a world in which all of us can actually be here together that becomes part of the problem. So take a breath, because I'm about to say something now that's going to be hard. You might need to take another breath before this one. Quote unquote, I don't see color. Take a breath. Now, I know when people say that, they're trying to say that they are not prejudiced. They're trying to actually give some kind of solace or comfort. They're trying to distinguish themselves from the people that they consider to be prejudiced. But it lands like a bomb. Okay? This is the real talk. When people of color hear a white person say, I don't see color. And I'm being very graphic like that because in all the trainings, in all the things I've done all my life, I am like hard pressed to remember any people of color ever saying that word or saying that phrase. Okay. So here's how it lands. And this kind of leads into the next thing about the difference between intent and impact, that they're not the same thing. So I'm saying the intent may be pure, but the impact nowhere matches the intent at all. So here's what goes through our mind. And it's real talk. Well, you don't see color. You know the difference between a blonde and a brunette. You know if somebody's eyes are brown or blue. You can tell if somebody's 66 or 16. You can tell. So what is this that you don't see color? What do you see? If you see all these other things and you don't see that. And instead of bringing comfort, it does the reverse. Because now I feel invisible. Because if you can't see color, then you can't see what's going down. If you can't see color, then you can't see what's happening. You can't have my back if you can't see. So telling me that you don't see doesn't bring me any comfort. That would be like me being a wheelchair user and you're telling me, I don't see wheelchairs. I don't see people blind. Well, if you don't see wheelchairs, you can't figure out, I'm going to need some assistance. And you just put that venue someplace I can't get into. Are you with me? Okay. So I apologize if this feels like a knife in the heart of with their good intentions. And I'm not telling you that you can't say it or that you shouldn't say it. Just be aware that when you do, it's probably not winning you the friends that you want to win. That's all. And we can come back to that. So in a nutshell, I'm going back to that next slide so that we can do just a little summation on this. Okie dokie. One more time. There we go. They're unexamined assumptions. The unexamined assumptions are, and the people are just people, is everybody's just like me. Everybody's just like me. And you know what? I need to, why is this doing this? Go back here on this for a second. Because I didn't say this, and this is important. In this people are just people, what there is the tendency to do is to project. Not only are people just like people, but everybody's just like me. Everybody's just like me. And once again, it's the reverse of what you want. Because then you set yourself up as the norm. And you set yourself up as the standard. And that's not what you want to do. When we hear you don't see color, what we're really hearing is you don't want to see your color. That's what we're really hearing. Is that you don't want to come to grips with race and how race plays out as a social construct. You don't want to see yourself in it. And as a defensive mechanism for you not to see yourself in it, you don't want to see anybody in it. So you may think that in saying, I don't see color, you're letting this person know I'm not prejudiced. But what we're hearing is you're trying to protect yourself, not me. Because if you were trying to protect me, you'd see me. You'd see me. Does that make sense? Okay. So just breathe on that for a moment. As I go back to this PowerPoint and try to get it. I am in a mode here. It's not letting me go back. I might need some assistance here. Sorry. My first time trying to do the PowerPoint, and I'm trying to get my PowerPoint back here. You know what? It's all good. I ain't even gonna trip it. I never knew use notes, and I very rarely use PowerPoint, and it's getting me off my preacher groove. So you have it here. I'll give the stuff to Laura. Anybody wants to get the PowerPoint notes, you can do that. We got to run with it. Okay. So this idea of intent versus impact. As I was just talking about in the people are just people, that we do something and you never really know how it's going to turn out. And I'm sure you've had that experience where you thought you were doing one thing, but the impact was something else. When this happens, the scenario goes something like this. Whomever is aware of the impact brings it to the attention of the ones who've put something in motion, whatever that is. It could be anything. It could be something that's going on around the house. It could be some business decision. It could be just something as simple as who's going to pick up the kids when. I mean, literally, it can be like that basic. And here's how this plays out. When the person hears that what they did had an impact other than what they had intended, they don't like that. And they feel offended sometimes that you would even characterize it as that. And they will usually hear that as a character assassination. They're hearing malintent. So what's being discussed is an impact, whatever, this thing that we're doing or the way that we're asking the people to come in, it's really impacting the commuters a lot, or it's impacting the ones who are newer, or the people who are more senior. It's impacting women more than men, like whatever like this impact is. That when it's brought to the attention, too often the assumption is, and that was intentional. So the first response is usually, I'm going to make you feel better and let you know that that wasn't what I intended to do. So I'm going to take up all the space and tell you about what I intended. Okay? I'm trying to make you feel better. Because in my mind, the problem here is not the impact. The problem here is you're not thinking highly of me right now. Okay? And what's most important to me now is to look good. What's most important to me now is to be understood. What's most important for me now is to be validated. Sound familiar? Okay? So, instead of paying attention to the impact, there's all this defensive stuff that comes on about all what I meant and pulling out the long laundry list of your credits and, well, I've always helped you people. And, you know, how much have I spent on you kids? And what, oh, how could, how could you say such a thing? And here's where it just starts to go a little sour. Quite often, when the impact is being discussed, it's not even personal. It's just cause and effect. This thing happened, and now there's this thing over here. But in your unwillingness to hear that, in your, oh, well, you're too sensitive. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, you're over exaggerating it. Oh, why does it really matter that much? Oh, well, yeah, maybe, but it'll be okay anyway. Okay. Need I go on? With all of those, now the person who's sharing with you about the impact feels invalidated. They feel discounted. They feel like they're not being taken seriously. They feel like they've been trivialized. And now it's personal. Now it's personal. Wasn't even personal before, but the fact that you won't hear me, the fact that you refuse to assume any responsibility for the impact and you are just so stuck on what you intended. And I know this is played out in your houses, in your jobs, and it just kind of makes you crazy. And it's like, well, why? I just intended it, you know, okay. So I have some recommendations. If you're the one who's giving the information, You're the one that's seeing the impact and you're delivering the message. If in your heart you have even the slightest bit of doubt as to whether this was intentional or not, give the benefit of the doubt. Give the benefit of the doubt in the conversation. And if you can say that you're giving the benefit of the doubt, that will help even more. So before you actually start off with the impact, if you can say something like, you know what, I don't think you even realize that, blip, blip, blip. Or, you know what, I know you, and I know like you wouldn't deliberately blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, this, we may not even be aware, but like something that lets them save face, something that takes the defense down a little bit so they're not, oh, how could you think this about me? Just cut them a little slack and they're more likely to listen. They're more likely to listen. Okay? I'm not saying that you got a, you know, brown nose or anything, but just if at all it's within you to say that up front, that will help. Now, if you're on the other end and you're the one that's getting it, take a breath and listen. Before you get all defensive, listen. And what I would invite you to do is to get into curiosity. Get into curiosity. Before you get into the defensive, well, that's not what I meant, and how could you think this about me? Get into some curiosity. Well, what makes you think that? You know, how did you come to that conclusion? You know, well, what's going on? You know, well, tell me a little bit more, because this is a surprise to me. Okay? Just that openness of curiosity. And once you've really heard what they're saying, then you can go on with the, well, gee, this isn't what we meant. I thought we were doing blah, blah, blah. But at least the person is being heard, they're being validated, and you now then are assuming some responsibility. Oh God, do we see this on our political front so much right now? Where nobody's assuming any responsibility for the impacts. And you will go so much further. These are the showstoppers. I'm telling you, time and time again, this people are just people is a big one. And this one, this inability to distinguish between the intent and the impact, another showstopper. Okay. So if you're getting the information, just chill out a little bit, get into curiosity, and find out what's going on. Now I'm going to say something that's a little counterintuitive. Particularly if it's like really sensitive. Like somebody's telling you that something appears to be like racist, or it appears to be sexist or something like that. And we feel particularly betrayed sometimes if we're getting that information from people who are close to us or people who know us. And it's like, how could you think that? Remember that the isms are two components. There's the attitude, and then there's the structural part. There's the part where it comes in systems and policies and procedures and whatnot. And every act of racism is not a deliberate prejudice. Somebody consciously did something against somebody. Here's the situation that we find ourselves in. we're born into this world, we kind of inherit things. And if you don't do something different than what everybody else did before you, then by default, you will perpetuate the status quo. This is about anything. If you don't do something else, then you're going to keep whatever was going on. So when we hear things, an example of this, Governor Cuomo right now, who just recently resigned from being the governor of New York, from these allegations of sexual harassment. I don't know if he's guilty or not. It doesn't sound good. He's like, I don't know. But I know that his line of defense hasn't been helping him. The line of offense, which takes me to the next thing about quote unquote political correctness, his line of offense has been, this is the way that I've always been. Like society moved and shifted, and I didn't keep up with society moving and shifting to know that what I was doing was like wrong. That's like saying, well, I always use the N word. I've always done that. I didn't realize society shifted. And that wasn't like okay to say anymore. I didn't mean anything. I've always said it. Okay. So the saying like you've always done it, that like doesn't help. So this idea of the political correctness. Nobody wants to feel like their freedom has been taken away from them. People don't like to feel co-opted or like they're forced into doing things. So what happens with this showstopper of the political correctness is it goes something like this, where there's this assumption that there are certain people that are getting too much attention. They're getting too much deference. They're getting prioritized too much. Their agenda and their needs and their wants and their asks and whatever is being forced on the rest of us. And we don't want to do that. And it's unfair. Because to give them what they want means I have to change. To give them what they want means I can't just be me anymore. I'm going to be policed. I'm suddenly now going to be the bad guy because I'm not kowtowing to whatever it is that these folks are wanting. In an extreme, that's how that works. One of the places that it shows up the most is around language, which is why I brought up the Cuomo example, is around language, around what we say, around how we say it, how we phrase things. This is a quote from Reverend Deborah. Offense is in the eye of the offended. Period. Offense is in the eye of the offended. You can't debate it. It is not arguable. You may not find it offensive, but if they do, they do. So then you have a choice that you have to make as to how much sympathy, how much empathy, how much you really want to work along with people or not. I, I'm having a flash. Oh God, this was years ago when I still lived in Los Angeles. There was a talk show host named Tawny Little. And Tawny had this couple on, this male and female couple. And the husband was president of Little People of America. That was the name of this organization. So during the show, he's explaining to Tawny that the proper name for them is dwarf. And that there was literally like some 200 something different kinds of dwarfism. He says, but the proper name for us is dwarf. He said, please don't call us midget. He said, that is an offensive term that was given to us in the days of exploitation in the circus. And Tawny Little says to him, you know, you told me that yesterday when we were preparing in the green room. And I went home and I looked up midget in the dictionary. And it didn't say anything about that being a derogatory or an offensive term. When people call you midget, they don't, I'm sorry, but this is not about, but just the absurdity. When people call you midget, they don't mean anything by that. I wanted to snatch, I wasn't Reverend Deborah then. I wanted to just snatch the woman and just shake her like, you got the president of Little People. If he says, call us dwarfs, thank you, Mr. Dwarf. I mean, there's nothing else to be said. Now I realize that a lot of times we want a list. We would like to have a whole kind of what to say, what not to say. Wouldn't that be nice? But it doesn't exist. And language in particular is real time. It's constantly shifting and it's constantly changing. Don't discount it. There's something really important that's happening there. Something really important. When marginalized groups start to name themselves, it's because they are reacting and responding to things that had been projected upon them. I'll give you an example, just in my own life. So I can remember distinctly when we started using the term gay. And it was in response to the clinical definition of homosexual, which by definition was sick and depraved and psychopathic and a deviant and all these other things. Up until 1974, that's literally what the American Psychiatric Association was saying. And what you'll find a lot of times in the language is that groups will pick words that flip the switch on what they had been perceived as before, or they'll go back and reclaim something that they had been made to be ashamed of. Okay? So it's like, no, we're not sick and depraved and whatnot. We're gay. We're happy. When I was on the board of directors of the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian, I was on the board of directors of the Los Angeles Gay Community Services Center. And I was actually the person that put forth the vote on the board or the proposal. What is it? The motion, that's what I'm looking for. The motion to change the name to gay and lesbian. Who knew we'd have an alphabet soup 40 years later? Who knew? I was just trying to get an L in there. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal for us as women because we were so invisible with the projections that were coming on us that had been from the men. And particularly, this is the time when the AIDS epidemic was really, really big and whatnot. And every time we'd hear that, you know, like the promiscuity and then this, and it's like the lesbians are looking at each other like, really? Really? Like, when's the last time you were in a bath? The bathhouse. So it's like, really? And that word lesbos, that word lesbian comes from Lesbos, which is a Greek island where the women who dared to be artists, the women who dared to be expressive were exiled there. And it became this thriving community of self-identified women. And that's all lesbian meant, was from the Isle of Lesbos. Or to be called black. When I was growing up, you called somebody black, that was fighting. It didn't even matter what came on the other side of black. Just you black, oh, fight was on. It's like, why are we fighting about black? If it just means being from Africa, why is that such a bad thing? Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. There's something really that's in there. Okay? And I'm not saying that you're going to get it, because I know how I felt when the younger people were talking about, hey, well, we're queer. And I'm thinking, really? Why do you want to be queer? But I got it. And it's like it keeps growing and it keeps growing and it keeps growing. So just realize something's going on. You don't have to pass judgment about it, particularly if it's not even your group. You have the choice as to whether or not you're going to pay attention. But if you're going to do diversity work, being sensitive to the language and not feeling like it's an encroachment upon you, it's going to carry you a far way. There's a little addendum before I talk about the last thing, which is there's a kind of shift that's been happening where there's some people who think they are so politically correct, they're exempt. They're so politically correct, they can say the offensive stuff because you should give them a pass. Because they know all this stuff, you know, already. But the embattlement about it, it doesn't have to be just about language, but language is where it comes up the most. And the last thing that I just want to share is about this hesitancy to engage. It's tied to the political correctness. It's where you're so afraid of being offensive. You're so afraid of hurting somebody's feelings. You're so afraid of your being hurt by somebody thinking ill of you, you withhold a little bit. You know, you withdraw. You don't reach out. You don't engage. You don't speak, or whatever. I get it. But once again, it's going to work against you. It's going to work against you. If you're not engaging me because whatever, let's say you're not engaging me because I'm black, I'm going to feel that. I'm going to feel that. Okay, because like whatever that is that you're having issues with, chances are the person's been that a long time. So they know the drill when there's an issue. Okay. So I don't know. I don't know whether you love people, black people, so much that you don't want to offend me, or whether you don't like black people and don't want to deal with me. All I know is being black is keeping us apart. That's all I know. Okay. So you may think that you're saving somebody's feelings, but you're bringing up unnecessary doubt. You're bringing up unnecessary walls between you because they're going to feel the tension. And the last big piece that I want to say about this is not making a mistake, being right and looking good is white privilege. It is. Everybody else, they got to take their chances. Everybody else has to take risks, just like I'm doing now. And you never know. You never know how what you're saying is going to be taken, and you just never know. But you don't have the luxury to not engage. You still have to keep showing up. So you really want to do good diversity work? It's not just sharing the power, but it's sharing the pain. It's sharing the pain. It's the, okay, we don't know together. We both feel a little bit insecure together. And trust me, honesty will get you further than trying to look good. You're going to foster better relationships by fumbling around, making some mistakes, even admitting or asking questions. That's endearing because we know you're engaged. We know, hey, you're in this. But if there's a wall or there's these defense mechanisms where you're trying to stay back behind it, it's not going to work. You know, we're all guilty of this. You know, I'll bust myself. I see myself do this sometimes. So when I grew up, I went from preschool to second grade. It was kind of like a Montessori kind of thing. It was like a Black Montessori. And we actually learned Spanish, to read and write Spanish at the same time with English, which was very progressive for like way back then. And I've studied Spanish at different points in time, and have had Spanish-speaking in-laws and whatnot. You know, I get rusty here and there. But I'll notice that sometimes if I'm up against a monolingual Spanish speaker, I stand on my American English privilege sometimes and force them to fumble around to communicate to me in English. And I can feel that they're uncomfortable rather than me try to fumble around in Spanish. Are you with me? And when I catch myself doing that, I realize it's a power play. I don't mean to be mean, but I just do it because I can. Because I've got that privilege here in society, and the burden is going to be on the monolingual Spanish speaker to try to speak English more than it is for both of us to fumble around here a little bit, not understanding each other and figure it out. So I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to look bad, but I'm forcing them to do that. And this is what happens when we stand in that. This is what happens when we want to take up that space where we're not the ones making the mistake. Then we force everybody else into to be the one to take the risks. And if you really want to do good diversity work, that's not the place that you want to live. That's not the place you want to live. Just go for it. Be you. Just be you. Let your heart come forward. Let your heart come forward. We'll read between the intent. You know when somebody's just a jerk. There's a difference between a jerk and somebody who's just clueless. You get a pass for clueless. You don't get a pass for jerk. But you do get a pass for clueless. Yeah. So on that note, I'm going to open it up to, whoa, that went fast. Okay, that I couldn't even say the word questions and a hand went up. Try to make your question as succinct as possible because I'm going to repeat your question to make sure that the people in Zoom are able to hear it clearly. So 1, 2, 3. So I'm sorry, I don't know your names. Yeah. Yes.
I don't know anybody in the marginalized group who's allowed to just say what they want whenever they want and make a bunch of mistakes. I've never seen that happen.
Not doesn't happen.
Somehow, people with white privilege are allowed to make mistakes over and over and over and over again and say, oops, I made a mistake. So how can you tell the difference when it's a little too much mistake, it's just a jerk, and when it's time to do a free shot?
Yeah. So, is there sound going through now?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is, what's this difference between like getting a pass and just being a jerk? And what is that about? Okay. I'm not saying getting a pass is fair. I'm not sure most of the stuff I've said necessarily is fair. I don't know if it necessarily is fair that if you've been the one impacted, that you start off by letting the other person know that you didn't think it was intentional. I don't know if that's fair. I just know it works. I just know that it cuts a whole bunch of drama. That's all that I know. So what I was saying about the clueless versus a jerk. The difference is around intent. Intent. Have any of you ever had like any elder relatives that say some things sometimes and you just gotta like, you just shake your head. You just like really, really shake your head. That could even come out their mouth. Okay. When I say that you get the pass, thing is that I'm talking about in circles of engagement. That don't be so self-conscious that you silence your own self and don't show up. Okay? That if you make a mistake, and it's a genuine mistake, it's not the end of the world. That's what I'm saying, that it's not the end of the world. And like if it's a genuine mistake, or whatever, the people who are with you that you're talking to aren't likely to just ban you, cut you off, never speak to you again, and do some big drama around it. You might annoy them and you might even offend them. But chances are they're not just gonna like cut you off. The jerk is the one who knows that it's gonna cause some stink. The jerk is the one who's deliberately trying to be politically incorrect. They're just no regard, saying whatever it is that they want to say, almost flaunting their freedom of speech to say like whatever it is that they want to say without any regard to how it's going to impact people. That's the difference that I'm trying to make. That if you're in like healthy engagement, you can stay healthily engaged. But if you're just being an a-hole, after a while, they're not going to want to deal with you. But you kind of know the difference. And I'm sure you know that in your own life, in different situations, where people are coming from, so to speak. Do we have any questions from Zoom land? Okay, all right.
Finally getting taught, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago at Inner Light, and it was
Thank you.
Everybody check it out. And I like when you're kind of being a reverend. It's like you kind of get into this vibration, it gets me all excited. It's super good. It was a really interesting question that you asked, because I actually feel like I'm on the other side of it, not on this on the side of, I really respected what you said when you were like, it's better to be yourself because you're showing more respect to that person than not hiding. And I feel like I've always kind of done that in my life, where I'll have some slip ups, and sometimes then you get knocked on the head a few times, just in all different things in life before I get the karma or I get the point. So how is it to go in a way where one's being authentic, coming from a place of trying to understand the cultural changes, and I'm thinking, well, why is that changing? That wall was there for, it had some purpose, but okay, maybe we're going to take down that wall. What's the intention behind that? And I find that I struggle with the response that I'm getting from a truly authentic question, and it ends up labeling me as being ignorant, as being trying to I'm just honestly trying to understand. I'm picking my words very wisely in that situation, and this is the most political place I've ever lived, and it's just trying to stay grounded and seeing all these different kind of things that are popping up, whether it's on the side of the streets or demonstrations or things like that. So how is it coming from from my position to ask questions without not doing it in a way? Is there some phrase words I can say, I can be hey, I have a question, or or something of that sort? So it's literally the same thing that she was saying, but the flip side of wanting to engage and learn more, but without wanting to actually be judged for maybe saying something wrong.
A very good question. Take a breath. It may be not so much that you are asking the wrong questions as you're asking the wrong person. Okay. Remember when I said earlier about this difference between the universal and the association level, and people being treated as an individual? Well, what happens is that, particularly for people of color, we are assumed to be a representative of our group. People don't come to us as an individual. Okay? So white people usually don't have to answer that question. Why do white people blah, blah, blah? And for you to have to explain white people. And there are a number of sensitivities about that, particularly in a place like Santa Cruz, where there's such disparities in certain things. And if you're a group that's a real minority, you get all the questions. And it's you just get bombarded with the stuff. And I'm not trying to set myself up on a pedestal, but I'm saying is that I've made a contractual agreement and I live my life, and I'm a professional diversity trainer, and I've put myself out there. My life purpose is part of being a bridge builder. Okay? Everybody ain't feeling that. Everybody don't want to answer the questions. Everybody don't want to stand here and have this dialogue with you. So what I would suggest, honestly, Google is your friend. You really, you live in a world now that's just astounding, the amount of information that's out there. And there's nothing happening in Santa Cruz that's not happening in other places. I mean that. It's just whatever, the police stuff, this or that. Just Google it some. Search engine, whatever, keywords, and just kind of See what information is out there that might bring you some enlightenment about people's experiences or what's going on in other places or all of the rest of that. So if you get jammed, it's the wrong person. Don't think that your question doesn't deserve an answer. It's you've run up against a brick wall. They're not the one. And so often in these situations, they've never done anything to say that they're the ones except be a whatever. Be a queer person, be a Black person, be whatever, a Native American. And there's that assumption that they can then speak for the group. And that can sometimes get you into trouble. Okay. And that's a little different. Okay. I want to make some fine distinctions here when I say it's like just be you. Yeah, you can just be you about you. Okay. But the moment that you ask somebody else to explain themselves to you, that's different. You revealing whatever you want to about you is you. But the sort of tell me about speaks of a kind of a privilege that most people of color don't feel like we have. We can't go up to white people and ask them, why do you do so? Why you do what you do? It's just, it's like it's not allowed. It's just not allowed. So there's some balancing stuff that goes in there. Though I would just ask everybody, if you really have a curious question about how certain people feel about things, then you might need to go about finding out that information in some other kind of ways. Or even ask them up front before you ask the question. Because they'll tell you. If you just say, I'm not even sure it's appropriate for me to ask you this question. But I was wondering about, and they say, no, you're right, it's not appropriate. No, but I mean, they'll be, if they don't want to answer it, that gives them a chance to not answer it. But the fact that you acknowledge that perhaps they shouldn't have to answer it, it wins you brownie points. But that's that risk thing of taking to do that. Do we have any Zoom questions? Okay, all right, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask a question from
Yes.
wherein I observe a conversation that gets stuck in the singing, dancing events, put the word out to whatever way I can. The gathering happens. Somebody at the gathering starts the conversation by looking around and saying, look at us, almost all white faces. We're doing something wrong. We must be being racist in some way. I'm responding to that saying, it's not racist just to be gathering upon our interests. What would be racist would be to think that we need to go out and recruit people of color to join our event. And then the response being, yes, well, maybe, but if we don't get more people of color here, then we won't get more people of color here, because unless we diversify, it won't be safe for other people of color to come here. So that's as far as that's where I get stuck in the conversation. Do you have any insight on where to go from there?
Yeah.
So I just want to add a little bit of context to the question. I'm part of a diaspora that is specifically talking about. One more piece of the context is that many people of color have come to enjoy the dance space I enjoy talking about. But many people have left due to racial injustice and social issues. That's another piece of the context. So this may reflect what's happening before you, so I understand that. But I've actually been having this experience with other events as well. So my question isn't specifically related to that. Thank you.
The Zoom would like that question restated if you could, Rev Deb, because they're having a little hard time hearing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if I can restate this, the question was around trying to bring some clarity to a certain dynamic that happens when there are events, and if the events are exclusively or predominantly white, there'll be some accusation that just the fact that it is that configuration means that it's racist, and that if there's not some effort that's being made, then it will in fact always be that way. And a question about, well, what's racist? Is it racist that you have the event and there aren't any people of color, or is it racist to think that because of the event, you've got to bring some people of color in? And then there were some extra nuances about that, saying what it's like to be on the other end when you are that marginalized group and you're the ones that are often not being represented. What does that mean to come into these spaces in these environments? So take a breath. That word racist is very emotionally charged. Okay? Very, very emotionally charged. And as I tried to state before, there are two parts to an ism. There's the attitudinal piece, the prejudicial piece, but then there's also the kind of structural, systemic piece. So this is one of these instances where it's the perfect example of intent versus impact, where you can say, well, there was no intent on our part to do anything negative against people who were not white. Okay, that's not what we're doing. We're not being like racist against people. There is a reality, particularly in a place like Santa Cruz, just because of its demographics. What I was saying before about when you just keep doing something the exact same way, you're going to keep getting the exact same results. That it's not racist in terms of like intent of somebody trying to do something against people of color. But the way of organizing will have racial implications in terms of its impact. Okay? And I'm saying that explicitly because I find that that word racist is so charged that people just shut down. And you get a lot further if you can at least establish the fact that there's a racial impact, a racial disparity, or like something that's going on about that, even if you don't name it racist. So in that vein, this is one of those where intent versus impact, you hear this, that's not my intent. How do I hold these two? How do I hold these two? if we just do things the way we ordinarily do them, then there's probably going to be the racial disparity. Not because we're bad, but just that's the way that it is. And particularly with like the demographics around here, you got to do extra. So I know the diversity work feels like a little bit of a catch-22 in the sense that you have to have some diversity to attract diversity. But how do you get the diversity? Like you got to have experience to get the job, but you got to have the job to have the experience, you know, that kind of a conundrum thing. And what I would say more than anything is when you're planning events, just what is your intent? That's all. What is your intent? Is it important to you? And I'm not making a judgment and saying like whether it should like or it shouldn't be. But if it's important to you to have certain populations represented or whatever, then that has to be a strategy. You can't just like throw it out to social media and expect people to come. So part of that strategy isn't just how do we get more people in here to do what we do, but when you're doing the diversity, it's like, how do we get some people that we can partner with early on in the creation of this event, where the event itself will be different. And the difference within the event itself will make it a more welcome place for some other people to be in. I'm not accusing you of doing this, but I'm saying, but too often we think of diversity being, I just want to get different kinds of people to come in and do what we do. As opposed to diversity meaning we need to diversify what we're doing. We think of the diversity as out there that we bring in, as opposed to shifting what we're doing within that has a different attraction value. Did that make sense? Okay. We're coming down in the last 10 minutes. Yes, if there's nobody in. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. My question kind of follows along that. It has to do with these days it's fairly politically correct to try to diversify. In fact, funds might be dependent upon having a diversified organization. And my question relates to how do you know whether by perhaps having a person of color in the organization, are you actually doing the work, or is this a case of tokenism? And I'd like to talk about what's the difference.
That's a very good question. So, this question is, how do you know? How do you know if bringing a person of color on is just about tokenism, that there's a lot of political correctness about diversifying and whatnot? Once again, it's a question of your intent. What is your intent? For what reason are you bringing this person here? And if you're trying to diversify, why? Are you trying to diversify just so you can qualify for the funding? Or are you wanting to be something else? So I'm at the tail end of the baby boom. So I'm coming of age, I'm telling my age here because it makes a difference in terms of the story. So I'm born mid-50s. And by the time I hit high school, like junior high school, we're off into all of the riots. We're into the busing, we're into the integration stuff, you know, and all of that. And I used to think that integration just meant mixing us up. And I'm big with language. The root word of integrate is integer, which means whole. Some of you might remember in mathematics, the integers were the whole numbers. 1, 2, 3. No fragments, no fractions. To integrate is to be in a state of wholeness. Not just mixing it up for the sake of mixing it up. And integrity is when you're living in that integrated state. When something lacks integrity, it isn't just that it's sort of immoral or unethical. If it lacks integrity, it's at cross purposes. It's fragmented. There's not a wholeness of all of the pieces coming together. Okay. So I contend, generally speaking, that as a society, we are bigger and stronger because of the diversification, that we're actually more whole. Now, you can see there is a big socio-political divide about that right now, especially since the 2020 census count just came out. Woo! You know, wow. It told us what we already knew, that the white population is shrinking and the non-white population is growing. You know, you have to be Einstein to see that, you know, going on. But all of its social political implications and what we're seeing going on with that. So it becomes a question of intent, really, is what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? And I'm not putting a judgment on that, you know, one way or another. If you want to be the Asian Heritage Society, go on and be the Asian Heritage Society. Cool. That's what you want to do. You know, if you want something else, you can be like something else. Just you be clear. And I find some of this drama that goes on, and that's why I keep talking about intent, is that there hasn't been clarity amongst the group itself about where does it want to go? What is it really trying to do? And by what criteria are you going to measure your success of whether you're living up to your values or not? So sometimes people are putting things on you that you never agreed to do. That can be the case too. But you don't have to take that on if you know you're not committed to that. But if you are committed to it, then there's something that you have to do. Now, this question that you raise about, is it tokenism or not? Life according to Reverend Deborah, again. It is a thin line between being a token and a pioneer. Razor thin. And when you're in it, you don't know. You do not know. It is a risk that you're taking. The difference is who comes after you. That's the difference. If you're still the only one, you the token. But if you've created a space and The organization has created a space for you not to be the first and the last. Then you're a pioneer. But there's a risk. Remember I said before about that engagement thing and hesitancy to engage? I've been in that spot a lot. Am I going to take this chance or not? But be aware that that's on people's minds. And the more that you can do to assure them that you do have an intent of them not being the first and the last, the easier it's going to be to get them to be the pioneer to begin with. We can smell it if you just want us there to meet your numbers. Ain't nobody got time for that. Got time for one last question. Or I can make my answers quicker. Because we did get started a little late.
Hi, I just wanted to express my gratitude for your honesty to all of us. It's really great. Often I found myself being the only whatever it is in the room. I felt a lot of what you said to be very, very true. So I'm glad it's being said, and I'm glad you're telling me some things that I haven't heard. Well, learned from that. I think learning is a big thing.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, there were one or two. Oh.
Earlier you were talking about like a one-on-one, and when me as a white privileged male, and I make that mistake, and I'm called out for that mistake. One of the things that I've always sort of thought about when that happens is that I'm being trusted. I'm being honored right
Yes.
now. And I don't want to belay that honor and that trust by trying to defend myself. I have wanted to go, oh, thank you for your trust. Can you please tell me more? And I just would love to hear you speak to that and just let me do nodded. So I think I'm sort of right about it.
Thank you for saying that. And I feel so remiss for not having said that explicitly, because I always try to make it a point to say that. I did a kind of similar talk yesterday for Keynote for University, and I know I said it there. It's a little counterintuitive. But when people are coming to you, particularly with the stuff that really hurts, like racism, sexism, but if they're coming to you, it's because they believe that you care. They're coming to you because they actually believe that you'd be willing to do something about it. So it's a little counterintuitive, because then the ally often gets dumped on. Okay, but that's part of being the ally. I don't care if you're an ally for a teenager or something, you're going to hear the crap. But that's because they trust you enough to tell you. So the fact that you're being told is a good sign. Because if somebody really, really, really thought you were anti-Semitic, or like really thought you were homophobic, or they wouldn't come to you and just tell you that. Not alone. You might hear about it in the newspaper or on Facebook, but they wouldn't engage you one-on-one about it. No way. No way. So it's a moment of trust that's happening there. Don't blow it. Don't blow it by being so defensive that they now feel invalidated And you've made it all about you. You've made it all about you. You know, don't, I don't know why I'm thinking about this. I haven't thought about this in years, but it was this dynamic, and I know that it still goes on, where you have a kid that's coming out to their parent, and, you know, it's like, you know, mom, I'm gay. Oh, Lord, what did I do? What did I do to, you know, to deserve this? And oh, my God, and your aunt and your uncle, and oh, what have I done? And it's like, hey, I'm gay. Me? And yeah. Oh. It's like you don't want to, because inadvertently, whether you recognize it or not, it's a power play. Anytime you divert the attention your way off of the matter at hand, particularly if it's about somebody else's pain, you've now prioritized your pain above their pain. You prioritize your need to look good against what it is that's happened to them, and they know it. And up until that point, it was about the impact. Oh, but now it's personal. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Okay, I think I saw one last hand here. Good. Oh, yes, over here. You've been patient. Thank you.
Hi, Reverend Deborah. My question revolves around the word integration.
Mm-hmm.
And well, that's right. I'm adopted and was raised in a white family. And it hasn't been until I kind of went into college that I realized, oh, I've been put in these boxes and I never knew all my life. And so my question, yeah, sometimes I've been called a banana by other friends, which translates to yellow on the outside, white on the inside. And so dealing with that, and then going on in life, feeling half of me has been ignorant to my culture and my history and my background living in the US. And then moving forward and learning more about just being someone of shorter stature, female, and also a woman of color who I never identified with earlier. I actually walked around thinking and acting and feeling like I was white, white privilege, because of my family and how supportive they raised me. My question revolves around the word integration. How to, for someone like me, feel more integrated into society, and also knowing with the kind of ticks or the boxes that society may play a large role in my evolution as a human being, feel empowered and have a voice like you.
That's a good question. Yeah. So the question is about integration and how do you find it? And there was a sharing of personal experience of growing up in a white, growing up adopted in a white household and walking around white privilege and identifying as that and not really understanding some of the ways that society is reacting or responding to you, and how do you figure out your own self and where you fit in with all of that. Take a breath. Identity doesn't just come from within. Identity is equally shaped by people's reactions and responses to you. When everybody's the same, there's often no need to even identify around something because you don't even, like, you don't even think about it. It just like kind of is. And it isn't until we come up against some kind of difference that we even think about it and start to identify. It's such a personal thing. There's no one way to feel about anything. There's not a right way to be a woman or a right way to be Jewish or there's not like a way. So all of us are having to kind of maneuver and find our way through this. I would say the most important thing for all of us is authenticity. It is a sense of genuine authenticity. You know, we're complex. We're all very complex people. That term of intersectionality, well, we all have our own intersectionality. We all have a physical attributes, we all have a gender, we all have a sexual orientation, we all have a race, we all have a background in which we were raised, we have a socioeconomic status. I mean, it's like all these layers, and each of those inform us in some kind of way. The most important thing, however, is for you to develop your own opinion about you. For you to develop your own opinion about you and not just accept other people's ideas about you. Okay. This is a challenge. This is part of the whole individuation process of adolescence. It's trying to get like a sense of one's own self and identity separate from just being your child or, you know, your brother or like whatever that is. Okay. All of these quote unquote identities, even race, it's a construct. It is a socio-economic construct. It doesn't really even exist from that much from a biological standpoint, like less than 0.001% of what we call race has to do with genetics, which is why we can exchange body parts and blood and stuff. Because it's a construct. I just want you to hear what I'm saying about that. It's a construct. That doesn't mean that it's not significant. Gender is a construct. What does it mean to be male? What does it mean to be female? And that's not an absolute. That'll shift and change throughout your own life. It'll shift and change depending upon your race. It shifts and changes upon geography. There's all this stuff going on now about what does it mean that we've gotten out of Afghanistan, and what's going to happen to the women, you know, who were there, who've been able to live one kind of life under our protection, and what happens to them now with the Taliban and the way that the Taliban is treating women. So it's like this stuff is fluid, you know, like, and it's messy. The most important thing though is for you to figure out who you are, and for you to go into those places where you feel like there might be something missing, or there's more for you to know. There might be some background of your heritage that you really want to know more about, that you can feel more whole, you can feel more connected, like, or more integrated. But it's a personal trip. That's all I can tell you. You can have two people with the birth parents that are, and just completely different identities. And how they say, anybody of you grow up with a sibling? Did any of you wonder sometimes if you actually had the same parents? You know? And I'm not trying to be evasive. It's just that stuff can be endless. So she mentioned about being called a banana, yellow on the outside, white on the inside, which is a term that's sometimes used for Asians. With black folks, it's an Oreo cookie, black on the white side, black on the outside, white on the inside. A coconut with Latino, you know, brown on the outside, you know, like whatever. But you have to find you, and growing up light-skinned and bourgeois, like light-skinned and upper middle class in the middle of the Black Revolution, that was some drama. Not just for white people, but for Black people. Constantly trying to prove, am I Black enough? You know, and I got to be careful that I don't slip into that, you know, sometimes. But it's your journey. That's all. It's your journey. And people can project off into you whatever it is that they want to project off. You don't have to take it. Really, it's like you don't have to take it. But if you don't do it, you will internalize it. You will internalize it. You will think about you what they think about you. So like coming out is getting rid of your own internalized homophobia. You have your own internalized sexism. You have your own internalized race. You have your own internalized stuff. And it's more important for you to resolve your internalized first. And don't worry so much about them out there. But that's what's going to keep you up at night. The phrase that I love, and I'll end on this, is it doesn't matter what you call me, just what I answer to. Yeah. Peace and blessings to you. Thank you, everybody in Zoom land as well. Thank you. So, Taryn Crenshaw and Brian Edgar here, and Laura Bishop and other people who've helped. Thank you.